I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon, light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. This came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty and in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we've come today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But it is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. America has signed its Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vault of opportunity in this nation. So we've come today to cash this check, a check which upon demand will give us the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America the fierce urgency of now. Now is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valleys of segregation into the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice onto the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the fierce urgency of the moment. The sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. And those who hope that the Negro just needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if this nation returns to business as usual. And there will neither be rest nor tranquility until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. And the whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something I must tell my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. We must not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggles on the high plains of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. This marvelous new militancy, which has engulfed the Negro community, must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied with our destiny. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make that pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who ask the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? Well, we can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, fatigued with travel, cannot gain by lodging in the motels of the highways, in the hotels of the city. We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We can never be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote. And a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied. And we will never be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. And I am not unmindful that some of you have come here today out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from their jail cells, and some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom have left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering, but work on with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. So go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to South Carolina, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana, go back to the slums and ghettos of all northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. So let us not wallow in the valley of despair. So I say to you today, my friends, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream that is deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created equal. I have a dream that one day down on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day down in the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, a state sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will live in a nation where they're not judged by the color of their skin, but by the contents of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in the state of Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor's lips, having his lips dripping with the words of nullification and interposition, one day the little black boys and black girls will join hands with the little white boys and white girls and become sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places made plain, and the crooked places made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all the flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. And this is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, and to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. And this will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, a sweet land and liberty of thee I sing. The land where my fathers died, the land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. Let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. And let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from the Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from the Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and every molehill of the Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, when we let it ring from every state and every city, we will speed up that day when all of God's children, yes, black men as well as white men, Jews as well as Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join in the singing of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.